I'm Rick Bennett, and this is Introduction to Watercolor. So what's so great about working with watercolor? Well, let's find out. Wet juicy watercolor gives you granulation. Granulation is when the pigment settles into the recesses of the paper and creates concentrations that adds interesting textural effects to your painting. These textures can talk about the subject, and they add visual appeal. Wet juicy watercolor flowing into other paint on the paper creates blends, gradations. The mixes create neutrals, darks, and vibrant mixes. The white in watercolor comes from the paper. It adds value, which is important to a painting. Water is attracted to water. The dryness of the paper acts as a dam. So when you drop water onto the paper, it sits in little droplets and builds up areas of high concentration. Areas of high concentration of water is a property and flows from one area to areas of low concentration. So where you paint water down or pigment creates wet areas, and the pigment tends to follow those wet areas. Wet juicy pigment dropped into the water creates little pathways for it to follow. These colors flow and blend, and the tilt of the paper carries the paint where you want it to go. The physical properties of water give you the control. Water stops flowing at dry paper. It flows from areas of full areas to shallower areas, and if you let it, watercolor does the work for you. This is my setup. I've got a palette that I use as a Stephen Quiller palette. It's set up like a color wheel. The same pattern, yellow, red, and blue in the same positioning. It comes with a lid that goes on top, seals it. It also becomes a secondary mixing area that I use. I have additional palettes that I use when I'm using a lot more colors or colors that aren't on my color palette. These are very inexpensive. They don't have tops, but they allow me to expand mixing areas in preparation of paint. There's a lot of theories on colors. I like a lot of colors. Some people have a more limited palette. I think it's a painting style, and you get to choose which methods you like to use. I have my water well set up here. These are low ceramic mugs that don't tip as easily. I'm not transporting them anywhere, so they can be a little heavier and more stable. The closest one is the one my brush when I got paint in it, always tends to go for first. So that becomes my mud water. It just rinse it out, get most of the paint out of it there. Then I'll pull the water out of my brush and then finish cleaning it in my clean water. Eventually this one starts to get a little bit of pigment in it, and so I'll have a reserve paint that's going to be clean for me to paint from. I have a little paper towel that I set my brushes on and pull back the water on it there. This is a test strip of paper that I just keep, and always before I go to paint on the painting itself, I'll have the test paper here and check to see if the paint I'm getting ready to use is the right brightness and if it's light or dark as I need it. When I'm ready to paint, the first thing I'll need to do is spritz a little water onto the surface of all of these. The paint will dry in between paintings, but it reconstitutes totally. So you don't have to clean out your palette. You can just mist a little water on the top of these with just an ordinary spray bottle. That will soften the surface of the pigment without getting a big soupy amount of water in there. And that allows you to always get some thick, bright, concentrated color out of the well, and if you need it thinner, you paint it into your mixing area and thin it down there. You also can mix a little color into it if you want to change the color. And this is the area I mix in. There's some thick paint that remains from previous paintings, and this is just some paint that I'll use as a neutral because it's a leftover paint and I didn't have to clear out the total space. It's just a habit of mine. This is a box of tissues that's kind of low. There we go. And it's handy in case I've got a spill and need to clean it up or lift back. Tissues lift out really well. You can use paper towels, that some people do that, but it tends to leave a little more pattern and not lift as cleanly. And I can get a real thin edge and just lift where I want to with a tissue. Use that. That's handy. And the other thing that I have that I keep nearby when I'm painting is as you start to progress with a painting and you want the lines that you drew with not to show, I'll erase back with a kneaded eraser the lines, so I will always have that nearby too because it's something I use a lot. I'm going to be demonstrating on Arches 140-pound cold press paper. Cold press paper has those little textural effects, little lower areas that allow the paper to separate out the paints and create granulation, which is an interesting effect I like. Arches has good sizing, it takes a scrubbing, and it doesn't buckle as much. It's important to use a good paper. Don't use a cheap paper like Strathmore. The sizing doesn't flow well, it buckles quickly, and the paper doesn't hold up to scrubbing, it starts to peel away. Brushes are the vehicle we use to deliver the pigment in the water. You should have a brush that's for detail, that's small and that will do signatures and small detail work. It delivers less, so it doesn't flow as much. Then you're going to need a small, medium, and a large. My favorite brand is Creative Mark Mimic. It's a synthetic brush. It comes in lots of different sizes and squares. A good brush is going to have a point on it and hold it over the long run. So when you get color in it, the brush is going to deliver that in thin lines like this if you need. You can smush it down and get wider lines, or you can paint on the side. You can hold your brush like a baton, and that's going to give you some gestural strokes that'll be just have energy and movement. You can hold it like a pencil, and when you hold it like a pencil, it will deliver small works like this and detailed, or you can hold it a little further out and do some gestural strokes. A little yellow in there, so we're just going to drop some yellow because that's going to be interesting. That's the bare basics of brushes. We're going to focus next on paints. Paints have properties, and you can go to the website of the brand that you buy, and there's going to be charts there that tell about each of the different paints they sell, but it also tells the properties that those paints might have. Some paints are opaque, some are transparent, some are staining, some are non-staining, and the granulating, and these will be listed in these very small print you see there, and it'll tell you what those are. One of the ways you can tell is by testing, so you don't have to go to the website. So in this example, I did some stripes down, let those dry, and then I put an opaque paint over the top. Now, opaque covers, it hides and doesn't let the underlaying show you as much. So if you need to hide some color, opaque paints also thin out nicely and make nice pales. Watercolor is known for its transparency. Transparent paints allow the underlayer to show through. They visually mix to create a new color. So if you look at this color here and the orange there, when they cross each other, they visually mix and make a different color than they did before. You can look at your green right here and the purple right here, and they make a neutral where they cross and cover right there. The other property is staining and non-staining. A staining paint will adhere really quickly to the paper and does not want to lift up again. A non-staining paint will lift out almost to the white, and I'm putting water down, and I'm just going to let the water sit on the paint and start to soften it. Now, a non-staining paint will lift up. You can help it along a little bit with your brush, so if we don't want to sit there and watch it get damp. But you'll notice that the ultramarine is a non-staining paint. The cerulean is a non-staining paint and it lifts back. The Winsor red doesn't lift back, it's a staining paint. Permanent alizarin lifts back, and if you work on it, it'll lift back even more. And you can just keep working wherever you put the water, that's where that's gonna lift back out. The dry is not gonna lift, and it'll lighten as you need it. Winsor blue green shade is a staining paint. Water is attracted to water. So wherever your paper is damp and already has water down, it's going to create a flow. The size of your brush determines how much water you deliver. A small brush is going to deliver less water, less paint, than a large brush, which is full, is going to deliver. The water will come in, and when you get a big old juicy pile of it, and a big old juicy pile of water, this is going to deliver a lot and spread fast. So I come into my alizarin crimson here and just get some of that juicy color, really wet, in a big old brush, and it's going to touch. Ooh, I need more water. There we go. And flow. And this is the reason that we use lots of water and a big juicy puddle, is because it blends and creates gradients that's really kind of cool. And the tilt of your paper can determine that, where it flows and how it creates. Let's say I put down too much paint. I can take my damp brush, pull out the excess water, and it will lift out wherever I need to lift back any of the water with precision wherever I just touch the tip. So I get control back of where the water flows so that I can get more of the blue in there where I need it, drop it back in. So I have control by how much water is in the brush and how wet the paper is. I can lift back and erase. I can drop more in. A small brush is going to deliver a smaller load. Gives me more precision. I can still lift back if I have too much water. Like I say, I don't have as much control there. Lifting back, I get a little more control back into it. So pulling back the water gives you more control. Wet and juicy increases the flow. This is a damp area. It's not as wet and juicy as this area is. It's just been sitting there. And notice how it flows more quietly. It flows less distance. It moves less. So wherever I drop color in, it spreads, creates soft edges, but I have control of where the water flows. One of the tricks you can use when you're working with two different colors is when you put down your big juicy puddles of color, you leave just a little area in between. I need wetter colors. See, I touched there. But where I left that little space, just that little tiny space is all I need. It's not going to flow into each other. And the two are going to still stay separate. Where they touch, you're going to get a flow from one to the next. Sometimes they're going to be awful close in level and not flow a lot. Sometimes, if they weren't so close in level, you would get more of that flow flowing into there when they touch. So the higher the difference, the more that's going to backflow into it and drop color in, and more of the touch is going to help that happen too. So your control factors with watercolor is where your dry is.
That determines where the water will flow to, how wet the paper is, and how big a load the brush has. So the wetter the paper, the more the flow. The wetter the brush, the more the flow. Wet paint into wet paint is going to give you gradients. Let's talk about how to mix vibrant colors and make pretty neutrals. On the color wheel, there's primaries and secondaries. My palette is set up like a color wheel. So the blues are a primary, the reds are a primary, and yellows are a primary. Primaries are colors that can't be mixed from other colors. They're made from pure pigments in the original color. But if you mix a blue with a red, it becomes a purple. If you mix a red with a yellow, it becomes orange. And if you mix yellow with blue, it becomes green. These are your secondary colors made from those other pigments. So let's look at the color wheel. Yellow, red, and blue. Now, this is a split color wheel, so I'm going to have warm and cools of each of these colors. So yellow, I'm going to have a yellow that's leaning towards orange and a yellow that's leaning towards green. I'm going to have two reds, one red that's leaning towards orange and one red that's leaning towards purple. I'm going to have two blues, one blue that's more purple-like and one blue that's more green-leaning, more turquoise. These are pigmented colors that are leaning more towards the secondary colors. Every color within each of these little pie shapes mix nicely with each other and create vibrant colors. So the new gamboge, when mixed with cadmium red, make a nice orange. The alizarin crimson and the ultramarine blue makes a nice purple. And the Winsor blue green shade mixes with cadmium yellow to make a nice green. Now there are pigmented colors that are already green. Sap green is a green. Daniel Smith carbazole is a purple. And cadmium orange is a pigmented orange. And these pigments will mix nicely with these other colors, so you don't always have to make your purple, your green, or your orange. You can use tubes, and that's a quicker way to do it. But each of these colors in these sections mix and make great vibrant colors. Now the other thing about the color wheel is colors opposite of each other are complements. When they're placed near each other, they make that color look more vibrant. That's the reason that green and red are Christmas colors, is because green near red make each other look more vibrant. Blue near orange isn't going to make it look more vibrant. So when I'm using blue in a painting, I will have some orange tones somewhere in that painting just to make the subject, if it's blue, look even more vibrant. Complementary colors, when mixed, make neutrals. So if I've got blue and orange and I mix them together, small amounts of blue will make my orange become darker and less vibrant. And small amounts of orange will make my blue less vibrant and grayer. Small amounts of red in my green will make the green darker and more neutral. Small amounts of green in my red will make it browner and less vibrant. And the same thing with the purple. Purple with small amounts of yellow will start to get less and less vibrant, and yellow will get less and less vibrant and more darker. So if I've got a painting that I'm going to put the subject is blue, then somewhere in my painting I'm going to use some neutralized orange nearby to make this blue the star, but the neutralized orange will make the blue more vibrant but not be as loud. Or I'm going to use some neutralized blue near my orange to make it look vibrant. Orange by itself is vibrant, but if you've got some blue nearby, it's going to make the color even glow more. So let's mix some colors. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move this over so you have room to see my paper. I've already got some juicy colors set off here to the side, and I'm gonna just start mixing these colors. So this is my new gamboge. I'm gonna paint some of that down here. That's gonna be the yellow that's leaning towards orange. And this is my cadmium red. It's the red that's leaning towards orange. And to mix, I start on the edge, because see how dark that red is? I'm gonna need some extra yellow in here to just, there we go. It's gonna be enough. A little more yellow here. See how that's turning orange now? And mixing near each other, it makes a really nice orange color. So if I clean out my brush and come in with my cadmium yellow and just a little of my Winsor blue green shade. It's made by Winsor Newton, and it's a blue shade that's green leaning, and I got a lot of blue in there. So let's just start at the edge there. Look, it happens. See that green that's starting to happen here? That's a happy thing. Look at that color, like that. Now come in with ultramarine blue. I need to leave room for my neutrals. Ultramarine blue, and I'm gonna come in with a little of my alizarin crimson. And look how purple that becomes. See that magenta red, a little bit more Winsor, and it becomes a darker purple. And they make happy mixes somewhere in between. Nice color. So I've made my 3 secondary colors: purple, orange, and green. So if I do complements, complements are opposite colors on the color wheel. I'm gonna move this out the way so I can bring in my secondary colors. Because if you look at my color wheel, the opposite of purple is yellow on the color wheel. So if I come in with some yellow here, and I bring in my purple, and already the yellow in my brush made it brown. Let me get some pure purple. See the purple here? There we go. See the pure purple there? And then as soon as it starts to get a little bit of that yellow in it, the purple becomes brownish in tone. And see where I mix it in with my yellow becomes more neutral. So if I come in with ultramarine, the opposite color on the color wheel of ultramarine blue is orange. And orange blue paintings are wonderful. They make great paintings because of you get the pale oranges become flesh tones. See that neutralizing of the orange there? And if I get more of the blue in there, it becomes a dark color and goes to a black. See how gray that blue becomes? They neutralize each other. They become quiet. But look how this orange is glowing because of this neutral gray, grayish blue nearby. That orange is just glowing. And then your reds and your greens. So I'm gonna get some thick green. That's kind of thick. And I'm gonna get some of my, which one? Yeah, that's yellow. So I'm gonna use this red. So I'm putting my red down, and then as soon as it starts mixing with the green, it becomes brownish in tone and quite darker and more neutral. If I get more of this green, the green becomes less vibrant as it mixes with the reds and becomes a neutralized green. And what this gives you in these areas is neutrals, quiet colors in between that aren't loud or vibrant, but are neutralized colors. See how those neutralized colors create some nice tones, some quiet spots. So using your complements as quiet neutrals mixed from complementary colors, coming in between my yellow and my purple, I'm coming out with some quieter colors that aren't loud but have pretty qualities. My red and my green, I've got a neutralized colors that are quiet. And then by placing them, mixing the colors within the section, I get vibrant colors. Vibrant, pretty colors that are oranges, greens, purples, mixed nicely with each other. Magenta, alizarin crimson near the purple mixes really nicely. My greens and my blues and my yellows play nicely with each other. And my oranges. There's a little yellow in there. Let's get some yellow in there. Oops, got gray in that. There we go. So, now you know the basics of moving paint and making great colors. Play with it. Put some paint on some paper and move it around. Try making colors, making neutrals. Play with moving it around on the paper and brushwork. Our next video will show the ways to build a painting. I'll teach you how to paint a rooster, and we will use the methods of making a painting progress.